Welcome to week 9 module. In this module, we're going to be looking at making arguments, presentations, and then also the PowerPoint as a tool. So again, our two main things that we're looking at this week is how do I make an argument? And there's some good there's some good images here, I hope, on this slide that you might want to pause the video and kind of read through these. What is an argument, argument essentials, and then parts of an argument essay, which I think you can translate into your PowerPoint presentation for your team project. Especially this last one, the parts of an argument essay, I want you to pay attention to the number 5 and 6, the idea of a counterclaim and a rebuttal. This is something that a lot of people that are making arguments, or a lot of teams making arguments, kind of overlook, and that is trying to figure out what will people say counter to your idea or concept or presentation, and to kind of be prepared for that. Okay, so we're going to look at a couple different things. We're actually going to look at some old philosophy things about making an argument. That goes back into the BC period of when civilization was really just forming to some degree in the Mediterranean, and we're going to listen to some thoughts by Aristotle and Cicero. But basically they kind of boil down to a couple of things, and that is personal credibility. How do you come across? Are you believable? And that may be because you have experience in the topic, that you have education in the topic, or that you're using resources like experts, so that lends you some credibility, your interpretation of experts. And that kind of connects into the next thing, the idea credibility. And here it's about we've already been working on this, about how to use data and not opinions. A lot of arguments rely on an emotional aspect where it's just opinions and trying to influence people with emotional arguments, if you will, or emotional pieces. And then, of course, your connection to the audience. Again, that kind of goes into credibility, but it really goes beyond trustworthiness and into how well you relate, how well you, in some senses, perform. We're also going to look at presentations, and presentations are really a tool to make an argument. We're going to look at some of the communication format. We've been doing that throughout this course, trying to get you to use, or encouraging you to use, a communication style that is easy to scan and read. When you're doing a presentation, the first thing you need to do is really know who your audience is. Who are you speaking to? In your project, you've identified a company or organization. And then the second thing, before you even start communicating, is to identify or know the desired outcome. What do you want your audience to do? And if you can make that into an action statement, then it kind of helps you tailor the communication to the audience and to the desired outcome. And then we're also going to look this week at PowerPoint tools. Okay, but do take a minute, if you haven't already, and pause this and just take a minute and read through those images. I think there's some good high-level data there that supports you in your project. And know that this slide is everything you're doing in your project. You're making an argument, which is, I guess you could say you're making several arguments. The first is the suggestion that the challenges that you've identified are key, and then the solutions you've identified to meet that challenge are necessary and valid, etc. And then how do you sell those to your audience in a presentation format? So this is, I think, the longest video we have in the whole course, and it's 20 minutes. So it is a bit long, but this may be one of the most important videos for you to focus on, okay? How to avoid death by PowerPoint. So take your time. 20 minutes is not that long. Get a cup of coffee, get a beer, write some notes, etc. Um, in this presentation, it's a TED Talk. He talks about 5 design principles, and they're pretty good. I actually don't follow them all, even in these lectures that I'm doing, but it's a good format, especially if you're not well versed in PowerPoint, etc. But he has a lot of really good ideas, and you really should look at them. And then when you are building your PowerPoint presentation and you have multiple checkpoints, pretty soon about building your introduction slides, and then building your challenge slides, and then building your solution slides before you even turn in your final project. So I'm expecting you to be using this video and lessons and reviewing your own work before I see it. And if you don't, then your grade will suffer in that, because you do have this as a resource. So again, he mentions 5 design principles. I'm not going to go through those. He does this, that's the whole point of the video. And then some other things I just am pointing out that paying attention to when he talks about the brain redundancy effect and the magic number of objects, which fall into those design principles. And again, this is one of the most important probably videos or resources for your project, at least on the communication side, not the analysis. So we're looking at another tool this week, another analytical tool, and it's the idea or the concept of core competencies. And core competencies are connected into business strategies. There's something unique that an organization has, or something unique that it does. He mentions in here competing for the future, which I thought was kind of cool that the course is using that. As an anecdote, I actually wrote part of that book. There's a case study on EDS, Electronic Data Systems, a company in North Dallas, a former company in North Dallas. It was bought out by HP eventually. And I was part of Gary Hamill and CK Prahalad actually were consultants working on a corporate strategy re-engagement, and so this is part of that book. And so he uses a lot of the information from their book and their idea of core competencies. And the idea here, it's not just that that Heinz is a ketchup company. What are they really good at? When I was getting my MBA, we were looking at Walmart, and in my mind at that time was that Walmart had just figured out something to make prices cheap, and so that's why they were growing faster. But when you do the analysis, at least at that time, what Walmart was really good at was distribution. It had figured out how to cost effectively get the products at the right location at the right time, so that they didn't have maybe 10 million rolls of toilet paper when they only needed 100, etc. And that may be shocking to you when you think about Super Walmart, and I don't know that there were Super Walmarts when I did that first study. But the fact that their core competency wasn't as much selling as it was distribution, transporting things, and warehousing. Okay. In the book, it also talks about what core competencies are. They're collective learning, something that all the people know and develop once they work here. It could be an integration of skills and technologies. It might be the ability to deliver superior product or service. Again, in the Walmart example, they could deliver a cost-effective product because they had such great distribution. And then differentiation. What makes a Walmart different than a Dollar General or a grocery store? And so all of these are important for you to think about when looking at core competencies. And this can be a very powerful tool to you when you're doing the analysis for your project and thinking about, and you really should think, what are the core competencies of the audience? Because if you can relate your topic back to their core competencies, you're going to have a more effective presentation. And that's always true. Know your audience, know what you want them to do, and part of knowing your audience is knowing their core competencies. Next, we have a couple short, but hopefully these are fun and interesting videos. The first one is kind of a high-level view of Aristotle and what his teachings. 4 questions he talks about, and it's fun that they walk through them. But really what I want you to focus on here is the last one. How can ideas cut through in a busy world? And it's talking about rhetoric, and we're going to look at that the next slide, which is about getting people to agree with you. And how do you get people to agree with you? How do you get your audience to agree with the solution that you're making? And he suggests that there's 4 pieces of that you have to soothe people's fears. So you have to know what they are. You have to be aware of the emotional side of the issue. Do people lose jobs, etc.? You need to make it entertaining. You have to capture your audience and keep them. And then using illustrations and examples. People learn from stories, from storytelling, and the PowerPoint is all about that too, is images and story, etc. And then the last thing, we don't have any reading this week, it's all videos. There's a very short video on what is rhetoric, and I like this one. It's a little bit too brief, but I like the idea of these 3 things that you, in order to make an effective argument, you need to cover 3 things. The ethos, that there's credibility, credibility of you, and then credibility of your argument. And that falls right into the next one, which is logos, which is logical and facts. What's the data? How do you make your argument? How do you support your argument? These are intimately and intricately connected to each other, ethos and logos. And then pathos. There needs to be some appeal to emotions, because this is still a human argument that you're making, even in a business case. Now, we're not trying to get you to make people cry and weep, but recognize that there could be some emotional tie-in, especially when you're talking about change. People are very resistant to change. It can be a very bitter pill to swallow. And so you've got to pay attention to those details. So the last thing she does, and there's again not a lot of meat here, but Cicero's 5-point plan about how to make an effective speech. And the first one is inventio, is that you need to collect all the data and the facts. And this is the analysis that you're doing, and I've been cautioning you to be careful not to move to solutions before you do this data collection and analysis. What, where, when, why, how, and who. Okay? And then dispositio, and this is just your disposition. That when you go in the library, you're quiet. You have a library's disposition. Okay, when you go to a Cowboys game, you're loud and cheering. That's a different disposition. And so to make an argument and to sell an idea, there's a disposition for that, and it's it depends upon what that argument is. It could be humorous at times. It could be more serious at times. But it really bases on those 3 again: ethos, logos, and pathos. Elocutio, your communication style, and here we're going to be using a PowerPoint, and we've already had a video about that. Memoria, how to remember the message. Do not read your PowerPoint. Do not read from a script. You will probably write a script, but I tell you, even with recorded presentations, it is very obvious when you're reading from a script. And a lot of times what you're doing is your pacing is off. That when you have a conversation with someone, it's usually probably a little bit slower than maybe if you are reading. And even the pauses aren't in a natural order if you're just reading. Do not read your presentation. You may write a script, but make sure that you are speaking it as if speaking to someone in a conversation. And then actio pronuncio. And this is the performance, the actual presentation. How do you show up? Are you prepared? How do you command the stage and command the audience, etc.? The speed at which you go through. How do you look and dress, etc.? All of these matter, okay? So this week, it's actually a pretty light week, and you've had a pretty light module. and module 8 was a work module. So you're getting a little bit of a breather here in the middle, right before we hit module 10 for the midterm, sort of. Okay. And so this week you really, while there is really, really important learning tools in here, the only assignment that you actually have from module 9 is a learning quiz. But do not mistake the fact that there's only one assignment, that this is not as important. There are probably the most important elements are in this module for your capstone project. All right, good luck and reach out if you need anything.